We got in touch with them last week about seeing if we can do a partnership so that we can give out coffee vouchers to people that actually fill up the city form and all that kind of stuff. And the girl that we spoke with was like, "You guys played Nerf?"
She was really surprised, yeah.
And so she was like, "Yeah, but I'll pop by sometime." And I was like, "Do it, I love it." So it is a process that we're going through, but let's pray. I can't remember who is praying, but that God will do a quick work with what we're doing right now. Take what we're doing, add the supernatural element, and see something happen. But today we're going to get into something quite practical and something that was just to set this up. I learned this a couple of years ago or something like that, and completely forgot about this lesson. And only, I think last week, it was brought back to mind. So with a lot of leadership lessons and all of that, we can easily forget them. And so, put them in practice. These things are not just meant to be, oh, that's a good thought, but it's actually meant to be put into action. So part of my action plan is to teach it so that I remember it better, so a bit selfish on my part. But hoping there's also going to be something that really helps people. And straight off the bat, because we're going to try to put this online, this is not my material. A lot of this is coming from Andy Stanley. And if you go on YouTube and you type in Managing Tension Andy Stanley, you will get a 15-minute podcast where he explains this really well. I'm stealing some of his material for tonight and putting it in our context a little bit, and hopefully we can discuss it a little bit as well. But yeah, there's a setting that up. But basically, the whole thought is this, that without tension, nothing happens. Without tension, we stay still. The whole idea of potential energy, when you are drawing back the string on the bow, there's a tension so that something can go forward. If you take away the tension, you put an arrow into the bow, even though you've got the right tools, the arrow's not going anywhere. You need to put in that tension, that potential energy, in order for it to go further. And maybe another way to see it is this. We all have something called opposable thumbs. It opposes the rest of the fingers. And it therefore creates a tension with everything else, but that tension is what allows us to do things like write and, hold a cricket bat, or, do something really big, like carry something heavy, or to do something really fine, like drawing and all that kind of stuff. It's only possible because there's a tension, there is an opposition that is going on. And in church life, quite often when we talk about tension, people don't like it because people equate tension with conflict. And church people are supposed to play nice. We're always supposed to play nice. And so we try to ensure that there's no conflict going on. You try to appease people, you try to make people happy. But by doing so, Andy Stanley is saying that without a certain amount of tension, then there would be a loss of forward momentum. And so there's something that we need to understand, that if there is a real conflict, if there's something that needs to be, that is actually kind of taking away from what's going on, then you need to solve it, absolutely. But I think something that we don't often think about is that we need to learn how to manage and live in certain tensions for us to be able to move forward. Everything clear so far? So we're just setting this up. So for example, the situation that came up that brought this lesson back to mind was that we were at a HarvestNet lunch last week and we were all talking about how things were going, and everyone was like, "Oh, it was your first service, how did it go?" And all that kind of stuff. And so we said what happened, and Pastor Dave was like, "Okay, that was the good stuff. Was there anything you encountered that wasn't that great or that you're working through?" And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, one of the things that I felt was something that we wanted to work on was that when I was preaching, it didn't feel quite like Live Church yet. It felt like there was a lot of people from a lot of different places, and that was exciting, but it didn't feel like home as a preacher yet. And so I was thinking, we need to talk about culture, we need to be doing all that kind of stuff. But Pastor Steve Cawthorn was saying, "You've been running for 1 week, Nate. I've been running for 2 years and I'm still working that out." And then Pastor David laughed because he was like, "I'm still working it out." And Pastor David was saying, "Nate, be careful that you're not seeing it as a problem to solve, but as a tension to manage." Why? Because the problem that I was feeling was that I'm not super comfortable. I don't know whether I can go certain places. I don't know if I could say certain jokes or whether I could take it into a certain place because I don't know where people are at. But Pastor David is saying the only way to solve that is to close your doors and not let any new people come. And so by solving the problem, then we would actually create other problems. And so when it comes to tension management, if we actually think in terms of problem solving, we actually left with a new problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for us, we need to, number one, learn how to see when there's actually a tension versus a problem.
Really good.
And so one of the things that Andy Stanley talks about in trying to find out what is a tension rather than problem situation. A tension situation is basically when there are two opposing sides and each side has their own benefits and drawbacks. They both have a valid argument basically. And so as long as you can find a situation where there are two valid points of view, you've got a tension rather than a problem to solve.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, if let's say it was a situation where you are just basically wanting to hold on to your rights and not apologize to a person, you've got a conflict, you've got a problem to solve. Does that make sense? But generally speaking, if you can not just justify your actions, but actually objectively try to watch the 2 points of views. It's like, that's valid and that's valid. So like we said in church life, maybe it's a situation of new people versus a strong house culture. We want both of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they seem to be opposed to one another, but we've got to work through that.
Yeah.
But tension doesn't only have to happen on a church level, it happens in many different situations. So, for example, for students in this room, you've got a tension of needing to work to earn money versus needing time to study so that you can actually get your grades. You don't work enough, you're going to be in trouble. You don't study enough, you're also going to be in trouble. But the tension is not so much trying to get rid of work or study, as some people try, but to actually manage it and balance it off and to find that place where it actually works. For parents, maybe another tension that you face is making sure that your child feels love versus teaching them responsibility. Very tough. You know, sometimes you almost feel like you're in a no-win situation. And so you just, for us, we've probably seen some parents that probably just cave to one side. You know what, I'm just going to make sure that this kid grows up responsible and becomes like Dragon Mom or Dragon Dad. Or, you know, have you guys never heard of Dragon parents before?
Totally.
Yeah, so,
More like dragon.
so you can totally go that side, it's a bit too far, or you can just like give in to your child all the time. But I guess the right way is hard. It's not cut hard and fast. This is where the line is. It's a tension that you're managing. You kind of almost change every now and then to deal with those kind of situations. For us on a organisation, church level, in trying to create leadership positions and teams, we want to have well-functioning, high-performing teams. But at the same time, we want to assimilate new people.
Yeah.
Again, we have a tension there. Because if we always just have new people and we don't have well-trained, high-functioning teams, we're going to be in trouble. No new people are going to want to come. It's chaos. But at the same time, I only want high-functioning teams, and I've been part of certain teams where it's like, we don't like new people. They stuff up everything. It's like, we got to that place where it's nice, there was a groove, and then that person came in and mucked it all up. No, but that's not right either.
Yeah.
So it's somewhere in the middle. The problem with this, that I've noticed, is that trying to see 2 points of view is actually really difficult. I was remembering this, like, the whole idea of multitasking is actually a myth. Humans cannot multitask. The only thing that they can multitask in is if one of the things they're doing is a mindless task, where it's done by rote. For example, maybe driving or if you are a super chef and you're just cutting stuff and you know what you're doing without actually thinking about, I can't do that. And they just chop in and all that kind of stuff. And even so, you can still make mistakes with that. But you are able to multitask only if something is not in your conscious mind and the other thing is. So you can kind of do two tasks, but that's not true multitasking. If you try to do a full-on assignment as well as memorize lyrics, for example, you're going to fail because you need to actually give attention to both, and that's not possible. In the same way, when we are trying to work out tensions, and we become very blind. Humans are very blind. I'm very blind. To many times where there are 2 points of view, but for me it's easier to see one. It's much easier just to concentrate on the one and to deal with it in that kind of a way. So I know for me quite often, like for example last Wednesday, for me the problem was that I didn't feel completely comfortable preaching on what was my own stage. And so for me that was a problem. But I wasn't really seeing that, hang on, this to some extent it might always be the case if I want to be an effective church planter. And so I was blinded. I didn't want to see that point of view. I rather see, okay, let's work on that culture, baby, and let's deal with that. And so we need to be careful not to allow ourselves to be blinded when we are managing the tensions by ourselves. Now, something that we will also be doing down the track for most of us, and not all of us, is that we will be dealing with teams. And when you have team members, you will realize that this tension is actually not so much being played just in your mind, but it's being played out through two different team members. And this is where it gets important to learn this lesson on managing tension rather than problem solving. Because by default, if it's problem solving, that means that one team member is right and one team member is wrong. And what you're going to be doing is validating one person's point of view and putting down another person's point of view. But if you realize that what the person is talking about is not sin, and is not technically wrong, both of them will have pros and both of them will have cons, and you're probably somewhere, you're going to need to find somewhere where you can make a win-win situation out of that. I'm going to talk about the whole idea of compromise in a second. Just to give you an example, last night when we were at dinner with the Ribeiro clan, Andy was talking about how at the church that they were, I don't know if I should be putting this online, but I'm not going to mention any names, but basically a person in high-level leadership in the church is also actually a DJ at Eve nightclub. Really cool. I didn't supposed to mention. Scrub that. And that actually creates a tension. Because one person, like, we were totally playing this out. There was one person like, I love that, that's so cool, that's so out of the box. There's a church learning how to function and be in the world and not of it. But at the same time, there was the other point of view of like, that's going to affect other people in the church. Them being in leadership and being in a situation that can be so easily seen as a compromising situation. And so you've got this being played out. Is either one right or wrong? And something that Beck and I were talking about at the end of the day is that it depends on the church. It depends actually on the whole church. Some churches are able to exist in that sphere, but some other churches aren't. For example, because we know this well, Centrepoint Church probably can't have leadership in that kind of a realm because of the kind of people that we're trying to reach out to. The kind of people we're trying to reach out to are very susceptible to alcohol and vices and all that kind of stuff. And so we have to be careful that we're not tearing them down. But for this other church, maybe the people that they're reaching out to is in a different place. And so this actually makes sense. This actually works for them. And so it's really cool. So what we need to do as leaders, especially when it's outside, actually, no matter what happens, is that the goal of managing tension is this: to maximize benefits and minimize costs. I know it's a very businessy type way of looking at it, but this is not necessarily compromise. This is not. Because compromise, the whole idea of compromise is to make both people happy. But what we're trying to do is to make a good decision. And one of the things that Andy Stanley said that is that in the 4 years that they've been practicing this, is that the moment that they articulate and mention, this is not a problem to be solved, this is a tension to be managed, the edge in the whole room comes down. And the people that were on opposing sides stop trying to fight for their point of view, but they start trying to find the benefits that they can maximize and the costs that they can minimize. So number one is to actually learn how to recognize and articulate, this is a tension to be managed and not a problem to be solved. So right now for Lyft, to give an example, the tension is that Beck and I want to be involved in all teams. There's a lot of tension in that because we know that we're going to slow certain things down. We know that there's a cost involved in that. If we truly want to be involved in the host teams, in the music team, the kids teams, in the assimilation teams, and all that kind of stuff, if we truly want to be involved in all of them, there's going to be certain costs. But there are also certain benefits to doing that in this season. And so what we've chosen to do is to try to outwork it in as best a possible a way that maximizes benefits and minimizes costs. And we also have a timeline so that right now we are standing in this position where we're going to be involved in it all. But sooner rather than later, we are going to find ourselves moving on that spectrum because the tension, in managing that tension, is time to move. It's time to flow along with that situation. Is that making sense so far? I hope that this is not just a church-based thing, but the examples are helping you understand and recognize what's going on. So if you can articulate it, and then put it out there, and then maximize benefits, minimize costs. When you're dealing with team, one final little note. I know jumping a little bit, if you want clarity about this, totally fine to chat a little bit more after. But one more thing about this whole idea of managing tension, especially with teammates, is to actually make sure that you are seeking to understand before you are understood.
Really good.
So, one thing that I am is I'm not good at losing. And so when I'm like problem-solving mode, and this is played out in the office with Pastor Joel and Pastor Pete and all that kind of stuff. It's good fun when it's like Nate versus everyone else, isn't it, Beck? And you sit there and it's like, Nate, calm down.
This isn't my husband.
And one thing that really helps in those situations is when Pastor Joel actually tells me, Nate, I see where you're coming from and I understand. This is what you're trying to say. I understand it. But right now, this is where we're at and this is what we're trying to do. In that moment, I'm like, why am I fighting so hard? Why? And so when my leader was telling me, I understand what you're saying. I value your opinion. And right now, this is where we're at. And therefore, we will take some aspects of that. But that we also need to take some aspects of that other view in order to make the best decision possible. That's what Pastor Joel helped me with. And so we need to learn how to manage certain tensions. And one of the reasons I want to say this is because in the next 6 months, there's going to be a lot of tensions that we are learning how to manage. With new people, with new teams and all that kind of stuff. And I want to be able to go to us all and have this language of, hey guys, right now, we are a little bit in problem-solving mode and we're trying to solve this thing. But really, it's a tension to be managed. And so, let's sit down when we are not heated and be able to hear each other's point of views and work towards an outcome that suits us all. And so that's part of it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We've got 5 minutes. I know we've banged through a lot of this understanding, but I really wanted to see, does anyone have a situation that you come across that you're starting to see, hang on, that's not a problem-solving issue, that's a tension-managing issue, and we can just try to nut it out a little bit live. So don't make it a personal issue.
Sorry, my family.
All right, Joe, so what about your... Anyone? Do I have any situations? We're going to run out of time.
I don't know if mine's one though.
That's what I was like.
Yeah, bring it
I
on.
don't know if
Go.
it's like-
Give it a go.
Okay, so a scenario. So like, what about if how do I explain this? So you're going to do something that someone's asked you to do, but so you're like in the process of doing it, and that person like kind of steps in and wants to do it in a particular way and won't allow you to do it like the way you want to do it. Does that make sense? Like how?
Sure.
Mm.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, is that
I think...
I don't know if that is what you're
Is
looking
that okay? First question: Is that person your leader or employee or someone in authority over you?
Not really.
No. So it would be a peer or a colleague.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just trying to figure out how.
That's I guess in a sense that is working with people. So to some extent it is a tension that you do have to manage in that we're working with different people from different backgrounds, different personalities. You're going to have different issues that you're going to need to work through, and I guess there is maybe, just to simplify it for the sake of time, I guess the tension that you have got is that you've got, let me just put it as urgent versus future. So let's say at the end of the day we come down to this scenario. We got a point of view of like, well, at the end of the day, maybe you can just roll over this person and just steamroll the person and say, I need to get this done. Does that make sense? And so like, stop it, you're actually slowing everything down, bat out and get out. And sometimes there are situations where you actually have to take the warpath if the situation is urgent. But then there also probably is the other school of thought that is like, hang on, if you do have time, it might be good to actually work out whether you can try to talk it through with this person. And yes, there are certain problem-solving tools that you need in each of these situations, but generally speaking, what you're trying to manage is this relationship. How am I going to get through this? You want to benefit, you want to have this relationship, but also have a better working environment. And you want to minimize the cost. You don't want to kill the relationship, but at the same time, you don't want to be working on with this person that's completely ruining your life. And so there are certain things to manage in all of that. And I guess you have to work out whether the situation that you're faced with is urgent enough for you to actually say, I have to do something about this right now, or whether there's a better long-term solution. So in that situation, there is that certain tension in there that you have to manage. And with that, there's no right or wrong answer. It's more about, I guess, trying to find that balance so that you get the best result possible. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
I'm not here to actually tell you what to do. I'm here to show you what the tension might be that you can work with. So yeah, there are definitely people that can really rile you up and all of that. And you do have to work out whether you just have to tell the person stop it, or you can kind of manage that person doing certain things that you don't like, and work towards having a future where you're training this person up, or speaking life into this person, or encouraging this person, working through whatever's going on, and all that kind of stuff. There have definitely been times where I try to take this approach because it sounds better, and I tried to take this approach for quite a while, and then I realized this is actually becoming bad, and I had to swap more into this kind of a realm, actually deal with the issue face on, in a way that I knew was going to hurt the person. And it's not nice, you don't like it, but then it was getting to a point where I was maximizing costs by staying there and minimizing benefits, and I needed to go a lot more to that side in order to maximize my benefits and lower the costs again. Does that make sense? Very businessy terms, but I hope you can see in real life how it's played out. So,
can I give another situation?
Yeah.
I mean, if we have
groups and we are leading groups and all that.
Mm.
And if we have a member who comes and joins us and seemingly fit into the group and all that, and suddenly one day, came out and he opened and said, let's take it as a he, that he has a personal issue, that he feels like, okay, let's say he feels that he has to confess that he's towards being a gay. So how would you manage that in the group?
That's probably not so much a tension to be managed, but it's probably more of a problem to be solved. That's what it sounds like.
But tension being that
The group dynamic,
the
right?
group dynamic.
So not
how
him
the others will
personally.
be responding and how as the leader.
Yeah. I would say that you're probably seeing tension as a conflict. But really, if you can see tension as different points of view that can take you into the future, different paths that you can take that will actually take you down different
benefits to it.
the different benefits to choosing one path or the other path. That's more the tension to manage. Like, we could definitely, let's boil it down to something quite easy. Like with the music team, we can definitely choose to have very high level musos and have an awesome team, or we can choose to actually accept and train up anyone who comes our path. For example, these are divergent aims and divergent goals. And for me as a leader, we do have to work through that whole idea of like, how do we do this? Maybe another example with the music team as well is like, do we want to accept non-Christian musos that want to be a part of it, or do we want to choose, or do we want to only have Christians in our team? And the truth is, sometimes we approach it as a problem to be solved, where we start to say, no, we need to do it this way, or this way, but really it's a tension where it's like, okay, where are we at? Who are we reaching out? In our situation, how do we maximize the benefits and minimize costs? We can't just be a carbon copy of that church that did this and was so successful. We need to find our own path. So in that situation that you mentioned, it is a lot more of a problem to be solved. Now you've got to work out how to teach your team or your group that now has got this idea.
If there are some members in the group who are very opinionated and said that if this fella continue in the group, I'll step up.
Okay, so now, yes, that's possibly more of a teaching people to see that yes, we could become this group that is holier than thou and only accepts certain types of people, or we could be a group that accepts people. And the truth is, completely run out of time, but the truth is, different groups will have different aims. And this is where you have to help everyone see what the aim of the group is and who you've got in the group. Because there might be a group that is actually best to only have Christians in. If you have an intercession group, for example, it might be better to only have mature Christians that are able to deal with that stuff, rather than have a person that's been a Christian for 2 weeks and loves the spiritual realm, and they come in and they start casting out things, and it's like, there's nothing to be cast out here. You know what I mean? It's like, hang on, this needs to be a certain type of group. Whereas maybe there are other groups in the church that are more for young Christians, but then there are also other groups that are more for even non-Christians, and that's something that we are trying to do at Live. So we do have to work out where this fits. Where does this argument fit? Is this even an argument? Because if you've already set out right from the start, this is this group. This group is to accept all people and help them on their journey with God. And you get these people like, we shouldn't have that kind of... So hang on, you've read the wrong aim and you're in the wrong place right now. But right from the start, you might have to manage the tension of what kind of group is this. But when you've clearly articulated the aims of the group, that will help you deal with future situations like this, where people come in and say, wow, we don't want this more. It's like, because. So, for example, our Bible study in the mornings, some people came in with the idea that Nate's going to teach. So right from day one, it's like, Nate ain't going to teach. This is not what this group is for. And we stated the aims very clearly from the start. Oh, I tried to anyway. We stated clearly from the start so that people can see, why are we doing this? It's like, well, that's not what this is for. And yeah, so, and try to still hear them out, still try to validate their opinions and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there are certain things, and that's probably the hardest thing, trying to find out whether there's a problem to be solved or a tension to be managed. So in that situation, it's still probably more of a problem to be solved because there's no tension here. This is what this group is for. You are trying to create a new vision, and a new vision is a division, which is a problem, and it's not a tension. And so sometimes you've got to be careful with that. But we're going to stop there.